because when Donald J. Trump becomes the president of the United States.
The other thing you get to do at a convention is roll out your vice presidential candidate, which in this case was JD Vance.
Yeah.
I know him a little bit.
What do you think of him?
Look, we're from the same generation. We're both from the Midwest, different parts of the Midwest.
Right.
I know a lot of guys like JD Vance. I've run into a lot of guys like him. Not so much when I was growing up in Indiana.
Thiel.
But,
Peter Thiel is his big backer.
yeah, for sure. And,
okay, if people don't know who that is, he started PayPal.
Yeah.
He's gay. He's a billionaire. I mean, I've had a couple of people who knew you were coming on this week said, ask Pete what he thinks about Peter Thiel being so in love with JD Vance, who is flatly against gay marriage.
So I think it's a profound contradiction, but maybe it's not that complicated. I know there are a lot of folks who say, what's going on with some of these Silicon Valley folks veering into Trump world with JD Vance and backing Trump? What are they thinking? Silicon Valley is supposed to be, they're supposed to care about climate. They're supposed to be, I don't know, pro-science and rational and libertarian. So normally libertarians don't like authoritarians. What's up with that? I think it's actually, we've made it way too complicated. It's super simple. These are very rich men who have decided to back the Republican Party that tends to do good things for very rich men.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
And by the way, that's kind of what you're getting with. That's kind of what you're getting with JD, right? So I knew a lot of people like him when I got to Harvard. I found a lot of people like him who would say whatever they needed to get ahead. And 5 years ago, that seemed like being the anti-Trump Republican, so that's what he was. Talked about how he was unfit, how he was cynical, called him an opioid, which is kind of a weird thing to say about a person, but definitely a really... But I mean, for somebody whose identity is that they're connected to Appalachia, which has an opioid crisis, that really is the darkest thing you could possibly say about Donald Trump, at least in public. But behind the scenes, apparently, he's actually calling him Hitler, right? Seriously. 5 years later, the way he gets ahead is that he's the greatest guy since sliced bread. And I actually watched this exact same process with somebody else I got to know in my days in the Midwest, which was my former governor, Mike Pence, who I watched start out as an evangelical Christian who cared about rectitude and family values, and then get on board with a guy who was mixed up with a porn star, make excuses for him, so that he could have power. And then he did. He got 4 glorious years, I guess, as Vice President of the United States. And it ended on the west front of the Capitol with Trump supporters proposing that he be hanged for using the one shred of integrity he still had to stand up to an attempt to overthrow the government. Right. So I guess, maybe not as a politician, but as a human being, what I'll say is that I hope things work out a little bit better for JD.
They're coming from prisons. They're coming from jails. They're coming from mental institutions and insane asylums. The press is always on me because I say this. Has anyone seen Silence of the Lambs? The late, great Hannibal Lecter. He'd love to have you for dinner.
His rhetoric hasn't changed about the election, 2020 election, and I'm really concerned that we're going to have another issue depending on who wins. So, I'm just really praying that if Trump wins, the guardrails of democracy will hold.
So I gave his speech a D.
Tell me why.
It started out great, but then he went into mistruths and grievances and attacks, and it just totally contradicted itself in terms of what he wanted to achieve.
Onto this show. I do not look on that Demon app anymore, except I do go to your feed whenever there's a Trump rally, because I don't want to watch it. I'm being honest. I don't know that I want to sit through it, but I follow your feed, and that's how a lot of people are actually experience Trump rallies. So you watch them so we don't have to, and we appreciate you for it. Was what you saw last night typical of the way that Trump's rallies play out?
It was, with the exception that he spent, about 20 to 30 minutes at the top recounting in painstaking detail the assassination attempt, which was obviously very different from a normal rally speech. And then he had another 20 minutes or so of acknowledgments. So by the time he actually got to the rally speech, he was 40 minutes in, and that ended up, being the main reason that the speech ended up going past an hour and a half. And, one of the things that's always really notable to me after Trump does a speech like this is logging onto social media and seeing people who don't pay close attention to him kind of appalled at his state, at how incoherent he is, how rambling his speeches are, how boring they are. And to me, you know, I posted the Jack Nicholson meme of him nodding with a smile because this is what they are. I mean, this has been Trump going back at least to 2018. His speeches have barely changed, and last night was another illustration of that.
And did you have a copy of the speech? Did you have a written copy of it while were you following along with it, or were you just experiencing it in real time?
I went in cold, and you know, I saw some reporters pointing out today that there were a number of prominent national papers that reported on his speech based on the prepared remarks. And so I saw in the Boston Globe, for instance, their headline was something to the effect of Trump emphasizes unity in speech. And so, you know, he kind of ended up playing the media in that respect.
Oh, totally.
I was very skeptical as news was circulating yesterday during the day that this was going to be a different Trump, that he was going to emphasize unity, not be divisive. And I think what he ended up doing is actually reminding people of a lot of the reasons that they were turned off by him in the first place. You know, he mentioned the China virus at one point, which I think should have given people flashbacks to his press conferences in 2020 during COVID. You know, he talked about his endorsement from Kim Jong-un, and I don't think that's something that a lot of Americans really think is worth touting. He dipped into election denialism, talked about how Democrats cheat on elections, which is obviously a lie. And so, you know, I think if he would have just stopped the speech about a half an hour in, you know, there might have been something to be said for this is a different Trump. He was more somber. But, you know, we basically got the full gamut of Trump, including the full rally speech. And so I think what he ended up doing inadvertently is probably reminding a lot of people of the reasons they didn't like him in the first place.
Yeah, and
so easy to put a D on the end of her name, but we won't right now. Well, you never know. Katie Tur, MSNBC, has at times been accused of being a little bit of a soft on Trump. Let's put it that way. Anybody play bingo? Seriously. I must stop shouting about it. Did you have on your bingo card this Friday Katie Tur being torn a brand new a-hole by Mary Trump? No? Well, cross that one out now.
Despite having no evidence for making this claim, Katie Tur of MSNBC said during Donald's first appearance at the Republican convention that he was humbled. Okay, first of all, this is not journalism. This is evidence-free supposition. Second, considering the man doesn't have an ounce of humility in his entire body, that's a bit of a stretch. Seriously, I mean, there's no circumstance under which this man has ever felt humility or been humbled. If you look closely at the picture I'm about to show you, that is the look of a man who is completely and pleasantly shocked that he keeps getting away with everything. That's not humility or humbleness or anything but smugness. I have evidence. Check this out.
I have some breaking news, Brian, that I want to get to regarding President Biden. And this is a statement that's just out, coming over the Reuters wires for us. Biden says he looks forward to getting back on the campaign trail next week. And he says Donald Trump's dark vision is not who we are as Americans. It's not much of a statement, but it is notable because, again, there are increasing calls for him to drop out of the race, including a number of lawmakers today, 5 congressmen, lawmakers, and 1 senator at least.
And there are questions about what really is going to change with Donald Trump, and there's also quite a bit of skepticism out there because there have been so many moments before where people have said he'd make a pivot, like he'd walk into the Oval Office and the weight of the office, the weight of the presidency would hit him. He'd sit at the Resolute desk and he'd realize that he had to be more of a uniter and a divider. Maybe he'd start with infrastructure instead of starting with a more divisive policy on immigration. There are all these conversations that we've had so many times in the past. Is this really going to be different? I don't know. But I will tell you, even just looking at his face in this video that we're seeing right now, I've never seen Donald Trump with a look like that in his face. Not once. In the very long time that I've been covering him, I've never seen that look.
It looks almost pensive, Katie.
Serene.
Not a word we normally have associated with Donald Trump. Katie.
He had the worst record of any president. We've had other concerns in our country. If you want to be an apologist for Donald Trump, that may be your role, but it ain't mine.
When you have a near-death experience like he did, where a bullet passes right by your head, and there's a picture to prove it. The New York Times caught a picture of the bullet going right past his head. I imagine that's going to change a person in a way that maybe nothing else can. it might change his tone. He might sound different on Thursday, maybe. But does it change his policy?
There's nothing in his performance, if that's the word we'll use, what he has done, that would indicate that he cares, prioritizes, or ever valued or did anything to support a democracy. And now on the ballot saying he should have immunity from whatever he might do. I mean, really, I have sympathy and respect for everybody who votes. I'm glad people vote. I know some of them will always reject those of us who may look different to them in leadership or the rest, and that's that. But there are those who have real legitimate concerns about immigration, globalization, innovation, and what does that mean for their job and their family's future? And we have to address those concerns. And Joe Biden is doing that, created 9 million jobs in his term in office. Donald Trump has the worst record of job loss of any president. So we just have to make sure people know.
That was a global pandemic.
He had the worst record of any president. We've had other concerns in our country. If you want to be an apologist for Donald Trump, that may be your role, but it ain't mine. And he has the worst. I don't think that anybody can accuse me of that. But let me just say, as a Speaker of the House, we put forth a $3 trillion bill. $3 trillion of investment in communities and the rest, and that stimulates the economy.
I just want to ask one more question.
Dear those who munch on this channel, yes, that's you, and you over there. Your mission, should you choose to accept, is to get yourself to invite more people along to the 24/7 Eyes channel. Please get them to subscribe any day between Monday to Sunday before 10 p.m. November 5th. For daily roasts with a political option and extra room for those wanting Dems on board. There will be gossip, banter, and funny bits to be shared every day as the British outsider Tony delivers non-stop what he's found round from America's political bag. This message will self-destruct and end in 3, 2, 1.